Joining me in the Catalyst studio today is City Councilwoman Gina Driscoll.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So we actually haven't had a lot of time to talk. We're just getting to know each other now, and some of the things you're saying, it's great because you haven't been in politics for a long time, and so you're sort of coming from the private sector and jumping into this, and it's still fresh. So I'd love to hear a little bit about why you decided to run. And to some extent, it sounds like a bit of an extension of who you already were in the community, but you decided to formalize that and run. So let's start there.
Yeah, I have been involved in the community for years. I'm very passionate about St. Petersburg. I mean, how can you not be? It's such an incredible city. And I've always been interested in our city government. I have followed the city council meetings for years. I created a great relationship with my predecessor on council and learned a lot from him. And then just also getting more and more involved in the issues through advocacy groups like the Downtown Neighborhood Association. They're quite influential, especially given all of the downtown development that's going on now. It's important to have the people's voices be heard in that way. And I really wanted to be the person who represents that and represents those voices, works for the people to advance the issues that are important to them and address some of the challenges that we have as we are a growing city.
Right. So when you put yourself up there as a candidate, immediately you're presenting yourself attached to a party and you almost have instant enemies, people who are just so entrenched on the other side that just simply by saying, I am a human in this other party, all of a sudden they're working against you. That has to be something that's strange to get used to. How much of that impact or how much of that did you feel?
It's very difficult. It can be challenging, especially when you're someone like me who has never made friends or enemies based on what party they're registered with or, where their general issues are. So it's definitely a different world that you jump into when you decide to run for office. It helps that with this particular district, it tends to be more progressive. And so I did have a great deal of support just from the beginning because people knew that I have a more progressive way of looking at things. And that really helped me a lot. But it's hard when of course, everyone wants to be liked.
Mm-hmm.
In politics, you have to get used to that not always being the case.
And what about moving from the private sector into the public sector as far as how things roll and getting things done? And what kind of adjustment has that been?
It's probably one of the biggest adjustments I've had to make since I started in this role. In the private sector, if you're in a management position, you can put together a plan or a project, roll it out and get it done. That's not how things work in government. You have many layers of discussions and revisions and a lot of waiting, for the next time that you have an opportunity to meet and talk about something. And I think part of that is because with a city government, you have so many different balls in the air at any given time. And you also want to make sure that you are checking all those boxes and making sure that any unintended consequences are addressed before you pull the trigger to spend taxpayer money. It's very important. And hopefully our residents appreciate that we do take a long time because we want to make sure we get it right with their money.
Sure. How much does the squeaky wheel effect come into play? Do you feel like you have resolutions or ordinances or legislation that makes perfect sense, but you just can count on one or two or three people on the very fringe who are going to come and be loud against it? And when that happens, is that a problem? Is that something that you feel like slows things down unnecessarily?
Yes, I think with any issue, we'll always have those few people who do not want change or they wanted to be done a little bit differently. And if it's not the way that they envisioned it, then they don't want it at all. There are always folks who have opposition in that way. And you just have to work through that. You do the best that you can to empathize and listen and really help folks see, why we're moving forward with a certain project. The pier is a great example of that. Why was this particular pier chosen and this design? There were many people that felt that a different design would be better. I don't think anyone's ever going to be in 100% agreement on anything. What I've learned is that I have to just keep rolling with it. If I believe I'm doing the right thing, if I believe the city's moving in the right direction with a certain initiative, then I have to keep going with that and understand that eventually people will see why we make the decisions that we do.
Have you carved out or have you developed any strategies that fit with who you are and how you like to do things that have been sort of counter strategies to some of these obstacles?
Absolutely. I'm a big believer in collaboration. I don't think that anyone finds success on their own. And prior to starting my role on city council, I already had some great relationships with some city staff. And I think that those relationships are going to continue to help me as I move forward with different initiatives, really broadening that. I've met so many new people who are very helpful to me in the priorities that I have for my district and for our city. And that collaboration just really goes a long way. When you go and find the experts in engineering or parking or sustainability and get them involved in your ideas, you can move forward much stronger and often faster through that.
One of the interesting things, and I know it's been talked about a lot, but all five of the newly elected council members were women. And how much do you attribute that to just, statistical anomaly versus a movement versus they were just the better candidates, or what's been your general feel for why that happened?
I think there were a couple of things at play. I think there is a general movement toward giving women more of a chance when you're looking at them as an option to vote for. And I'm grateful for that, but I try to make sure that I'm earning that as well. So it can be about being a woman, and that can be a plus because there are typical traits that women possess that could tend to make them better in government. But you also want to make sure that you're choosing the right person for the job as well. So I like to think that I was elected because I was what people saw as the best person suited for this position. I happen to be a woman. That's kind of an extra benefit because they know that women tend to take a more cooperative approach to solving problems, that they are more likely to reach out to others for not only assistance, but for input and for partnerships. And I'm not trying to create a stereotype through that or anything. It's just that, it's known that women are more likely to be that way. And often when you have that collaborative approach, you're more likely to get things done.
So we had a guest on the SPX podcast named Joanna Sykes, who was instrumental in bringing the Imagine Museum and building the Imagine Museum here. And she's really fascinating. And, she made some interesting points. Obviously in politics, local politics, that historically has been male dominated. And so you might say that the infrastructure was created by men for men and sort of the methods of doing things. And, Joanna sort of said, if lead as a woman and be yourself and don't necessarily try to morph into the infrastructure. So how do you identify with that and coming in as a woman to, something that's probably less male than it has been in history, but was rooted in male foundation? What are your philosophies or reflections on that?
It's interesting because I just finished reading for the second time Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In, which is all about women in leadership. And she talks about how difficult it can be for women to get into, especially in certain fields, that have been male dominated, like politics. There is a tendency to be treated differently and not in a positive way. The pat on the head and you'll do better next time, the patriarch, the old boys club, it does still exist in many areas. I think that on city council, we've been able to conquer that and sort of demolish that idea within our city government because we have 5 out of 8 council members as women seated now. And that really does change things quite a bit. We do not have that old boys club. And there never was an old girls club at all. And I don't want there to be. It really needs to be about a group of individuals who care about our city working together.
As a council person, you're exposed to a lot of needs in the community, a lot of injustices in the community. And then on the flip side of that, there are a lot of things that are important that tend to get left behind because they're not technically injustices or needs, and so, they'll, you don't worry about art when you're hungry, right? So when you receive all these inputs and absorb all these different opportunities to serve the community, what's sort of your process to decide what you give your time to and what you give your attention to, and how much that plays into the other council folks and what they're doing? How aware of you, if you say, well, I would do this, but Darden's doing it, so I can let her do that and I can go concentrate on this. So what's sort of your filter for that?
It can be difficult because, especially in my district, which is so big and so diverse, I mean, the issues that people face are as unique as the neighborhoods that they live in. And it really does reach across the entire spectrum when you look at what people's needs are or what their priorities are. I listen to all of that and I have to decide what my priorities are based on what the people need and also on what they want. So I could be in one neighborhood where the main problem is that there is not a grocery store within a reasonable distance, and you have low income families. So they don't always have the means to get to a grocery store to, buy a few things to feed their families. That becomes a challenge. So that's one of the bigger issues that, I have to address and that gets placed high on my priority list because we're talking about simple human basic needs. And then you have, in a different neighborhood, it could be that there are crime issues or issues with the homeless who are kind of hanging out and maybe not behaving appropriately. You have to, work on that. And then we have, folks who want to have a piece of art placed in a certain place. All of those things are important. The perceptions that people have about their needs and their wants and their priorities is their reality. So it's really just about putting yourself in their shoes and understanding where they're coming from. But then when it's time for me to do my work, I have to decide, what are the long term projects that we have to, what's the long term initiative, and what are things that we can solve in a short order. So it's a constant juggling. And sometimes a priority one day will not be a priority the next day. It often depends on what we have coming up that we have to vote on, or, a meeting that we can pull together or whatever. So I constantly have shifting priorities, but there are some main things that I always have at the top that I'm trying to work on that are longer term things, but I can do something on that every single day.
So with all that flux and all those voices in your ear and then all the challenges with how government rolls, are you finding meaning? Are you enjoying yourself?
Yes, absolutely. I am so busy all the time. It's really nonstop because I truly want to be there for everyone. Plus we have a ton of reading that we have to do for our agenda and committee meetings every week. And then, additional community events that I like to be out at because it's very important for me to be out in the community. And part of the reason for that is because you can get really bogged down in the negative stuff and the amount of reading that you have to do and all of the minutia. If I go out and I go to a neighborhood association event or a community, social event, or even out, doing a little bit of volunteer work. I volunteer at Midtown Academy reading to the kids once a month during the school year. That re-energizes me in a way that I can't even describe because I do all of that and it reminds me of why I'm handling this stuff that's not so much fun. So I would say every single day since I have started this position, I get home at the end of the day and I'm absolutely exhausted, but I look at it and I can tell myself that I'm exactly where I need to be in my life right now. So it's such an honor and a privilege to be able to serve our city in this capacity. I don't take that for granted. I don't get to do this forever. So I'm just thrilled every day that I have a chance to get out there and do some good for everyone.
It's wonderful. And we know your time is valuable and we do appreciate you sharing a little with us.
Thank you.